I attended a mostly white upper-class private school in Jackson, Mississippi, and I was a lot like Starr. I was the only black girl in most of my classes, and I lived in the hood, so I had to often be two different people in two different worlds. And it was while I was in school that a young man named Oscar Grant lost his life in Oakland, California. And although that was hundreds of miles away, it led to conversations at my school and in my neighborhood. And my neighborhood, Oscar was one of us, but at my school, well, maybe he deserved it. He was an ex-con. Why are people so upset? And I was angry and I was frustrated. And in my anger and frustration, I decided to write a story about a boy named Khalil and a girl named Starr, and their journey in dealing with a situation much like Oscar's. I've always said, and I try to remind my readers of this, that books and movies are fraternal twins. They're not going to be identical. They're not going to look exactly the same, but they're going to share a lot of similarities. And what got me, though, from the very beginning was that everyone was dedicated to making sure that the heart of the book remained in the movie, and they've done that. George has been incredible in that sense. He wants to keep it as true to the book as possible. You know, it's a 400 and something page book. That's hard to get into a movie, but it's so spot on. I couldn't be happier with it. And it's knowing, though, that they are so dedicated to it, not just even George, but like Amandla carries a copy of the book around, you know? And the cast and the crew, everyone has read it. And you get that sense that, yeah, we want this to be as true to the source material as possible. George was actually one of the first people I ever spoke to on the phone about the project becoming a movie. And his phone conversation stood out like immediately. I remember my literary agent was on the phone as well, and afterwards he called me and he was like, that guy is it. He gets it. And he gets the themes of it. He gets the feelings of it. He gets what's not on the page. And as an author and an artist even, to have that and to see that and to have someone who connects with it in that way is incredible. So from the beginning, I'm a huge fan of his work, first of all. I haven't told him this, so this is like my first time admitting this out loud, but like his movie Soul Food was like one of the things that pushed me into writing, because he has an ensemble cast in that movie, and it was like, it did something for me, it clicked for me, and I was like, I can write a lot of characters too, maybe, and maybe I can do ensemble cast. So if you look at The Hate U Give, it's a big cast. So he's been like a big inspiration of mine from the time I was a little kid watching Soul Food and watching Barbershop. So it just felt right, and I'm honored to have him on this. For me as a writer, music definitely fuels me as I write. I used to want to be a rapper, but then I realized you can only say so much in 16 bars in a song. So that's why I turned to books. But for me, in a lot of ways, you know, hip-hop is poetry. Hip-hop is art. And it fuels me and it fuels how I write. I often say I want to write the way that rappers rap. I want to be unfiltered. I want to be raw. I want to go there. And that's exactly what we're even doing with this movie. It's unfiltered. It's going there. It's touching on these topics the same way a rapper would. So I think in a lot of ways, it's reflective of the culture. It's reflective of the art form of hip-hop in that sense. We have this young girl who's going through something so traumatic, but we're not holding back on it. We're going to show you the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and that's what hip-hop does. So to me, it's a marriage. They go hand in hand. The Hate U Give is about 16-year-old Starr who lives in these two different worlds, the mostly black poor neighborhood where she lives and the mostly white upper-class private school that she attends. And the struggle of being two different people in two different worlds becomes even harder when she witnesses her childhood best friend Khalil get killed by a cop. Khalil was unarmed. And what Starr does or does not say could not only change her community, but it could end her life. And while it's about police brutality and it's about those things, it's also about love and it's about family and having a strong foundation and what that means. He has the talk, as we call it in the black community with Starr and Seven, about how to behave if they are ever pulled over by a police officer, if they're ever confronted by a police officer. I got the talk myself around that same age, and it was actually by a family member who was a cop. So this is a conversation that a lot of black parents have, how to behave in front of a cop, where to put your hands, what to say, what to do. And the unfortunate thing is, it feels as if sometimes the talk is no longer even relevant or can be applied, because so many of these cases, we see it happen over and over again. People sometimes do what they're exactly supposed to do, and they still end up dead. But it's a talk still that's still being held, because I think for a lot of us, we feel like we have to do it either way. And we know that outcome could be bad, but we still have to prepare our children. And that's exactly what Maverick wants to do. He wants to prepare Starr, Seven, and later Sakani for what could happen and what they could see and what they need to do so that they can hopefully get home safe. Maverick, to me, represents redemption. With Maverick, we see a guy who was once a drug dealer, who was has been in prison, who was once a gang member, and he's turned his life around. And you see the scars of his past, you see his tattoos and all of this, but he's this soft, gentle guy now his main priority is providing for his family and providing them safety. And the fact that he gives Starr and Seven that talk at such an early age, that's part of him being that protective father. He's seen things, he's experienced things. He knows that the world is not always going to be safe for them, or that it's not always going to be welcoming to them, or that it won't always accept them, and he wants to prepare them early. And it's a talk that a lot of parents have to have, unfortunately, Black parents have to have at young ages now with their children. So he gives it to them early because he's always the kind of dad that says, I want to give it to you straight. Maverick doesn't want to lie to his kids. He wants them to be prepared for the real world because he's had to be prepared for the real world. She and Khalil are pulled over, and Khalil and the cop kind of get into a little back and forth conversation. And unfortunately, it ends with Khalil being killed by the cop, and he was unarmed. But the officer assumed that he had a weapon, and Starr is the only witness. And it's the most traumatic thing that's happened to her. She sees it happen, and she has to, from that point on, figure out, what do I say? How do I speak up about this? She's often said she's seen cases like this. We've all seen cases like this where people become hashtags, but it's another thing when you see it happen right in front of you. So for her, this is the defining moment of her life. This young lady is incredible. Her activism and the way she speaks out and uses her art form and uses her platform to speak up and speak out for the oppressed is incredible. And she only just turned 19. And I look at her, I'm like, what was I doing with my life at 19? You were amazing. But it felt right. It felt perfect. And now seeing her after almost 2 years now, knowing she was attached to this project, seeing her actually become Starr and study the book and study Starr's mannerisms and all of this and ask me questions and stuff and really get into the character, and then seeing her on camera become Starr has been probably one of the most incredible things in my life. We couldn't have had anyone better to play this character. She's bringing it, and she's brought me to tears several times, but I'm eternally grateful to have her on this project. She is amazing. It's about love in a lot of ways. So while the title says the hate you give, I still think there's a lot of love involved.
Got some love you give.
Yeah, the love you give. We call it thug love.
Yeah.